Evelyn Y Davis, known as EYD to those that had to deal with her on a regular basis, was quite a colorful character until she passed away a few years ago. Today on Zippy Point.
Quick Zips by Zippy Point.
Quick and dirty. I'm Brock Romanek. I'm a big fan of yous. So Evelyn was the most well-known shareholder proponent of her generation. She was active from the 1960s through her unofficial retirement around 2012. So it was 50 years of EYD, attending 36 or so annual meetings per year. Evelyn had quite a life, a concentration camp survivor, a multimillionaire, a philanthropist. And like all shareholder proponents who leave a mark, her proposals pushed the governance envelope, trying to get companies to do the right thing. She believed in shareholder rights. But saying she was a colorful character is putting it mildly. Her appearances at annual meetings was legendary. It was always about Evelyn, often at the expense of the other shareholders who attended the shareholders meeting. But they became stories for those who had been there to tell for years and years. She was well known as someone who could get a CEO on the line, and she did that often. She had disdain for women in general, so she would go over a corporate secretary's head, if that corporate secretary was a woman, in a heartbeat and get that CEO on the phone. She self-published a newsletter, Highlights and Lowlights, at $600 per issue. That was a review of her governance battles that regularly featured photos of her with bemused CEOs. Here's a picture of Evelyn from her first issue of her Highlights and Lowlights in 1965. So for those of you who have never had the pleasure, go ahead and ask an old timer for their favorite EYD story. Many of them are unsuitable for this family Vid-Guide. She was a trip, man. Here is Evelyn's pre-bought tombstone in Washington, D.C. I believe it's 2 divorces behind. And she lived at the Watergate here in D.C. I also urge you to listen to the podcast I conducted with one of Evelyn's ex-husbands, Jim Patterson. That's up on thecorporatecouncil.net in 2015. Jim gives his interesting perspective, too, about Evelyn. She was an interesting character, and she was a character. So I'll wind up here by playing this 2-minute video that I taped about 7-8 years ago when Evelyn retired, one of my first attempts at theatrical video making.
The SEC has a rule, the shareholder proposal rule, Rule 14A8. Shareholders who own $2,000 worth of stock can put a proposal on a company's ballot for their next annual shareholders meeting. Evelyn Davis, also known as EYD, Evelyn has placed proposals on an average of 20 per year over a span of 5 decades. She essentially retired in 2012. Although there is that matter of that one proposal in 2014, she's essentially retired. Evelyn picked topics that were popular with other shareholders to help garner some votes. Declassification of boards, for one. So it's difficult for companies to exclude Evelyn's proposals under the shareholder proposal rule. Within our industry, Evelyn's antics were quite famous or infamous. All corporate secretaries of a certain age have a favorite Evelyn Davis story. Mine is that she approached the board of directors sitting at the front of a shareholders meeting and mooned them. She didn't do the Dougie. She mooned them. Evelyn preferred to deal with men. For example, I'll read you this comment in the Washington Post about Evelyn. Hopefully a male editor will pick out the pictures, not some jealous female editor who will pick out the worst pictures. End quote from Evelyn. Evelyn was proud that many Fortune 50 CEOs would take her call. Talking Fortune 50 here. The best known aspects of Evelyn's tactics was her publication racket. Companies paid $600 for her annual Highlights and Lowlights, which consisted of her views on business, politics, and herself. How about them apples? Evelyn is a millionaire who is also a philanthropist. More than one college has a reading room named after her, and she supports many journalism efforts. Notice that I never called Evelyn a gadfly. Me no gusto that term. Evelyn refers to herself as the queen of the corporate jungle. Roar.
So you get the idea. Evelyn was quite a character. I guess maybe I'm a character too. I'm glad I don't do those jump cuts anymore. It's straightforward filmmaking here. I have another Vid-Guide about the Gilbert brothers, the well-known shareholder proponents. Well, they used to be well-known. They're not so well-known anymore, but they were the generation before Evelyn, and they were colorful too. A link to that Vid-Guide is beneath this video. And I also have another Vid-Guide about gadflies, the term, and why I me no gusta that term. Check it out.